Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your cooperation in pretending that I was dead. Word on the street is that the LaFoe dynasty and the Reddies, which is what Big Red calls his cohort, they all seem to think that that's the case. So mission accomplished, right? When I last left off, I faked my own death by crashing into a ramen restaurant as a part of a sting operation to infiltrate the Reddies, which is a gang of organized crime located here in Los Angeles, and their rivals, the LaFoe dynasty. So after that happened, they gave me a burner cell phone, which Officer Frank told me was explicitly only to be used for the case. I was sitting at home one night and it rang, ring, ring, ring. That's the sound a phone makes when it rings. And I opened it up and I said, "Hello, this is Dan Henschel. Who is this?" And Frank said, "No! You are supposed to make sure that you maintain your anonymity. Never answer the phone with your name." So I said, "Okay, I mean, that's not very polite, but I suppose I understand the logic." And he said, "Come meet me down by the train tracks." There's sort of some abandoned train tracks out here, where neuroscientists love to hang out and Nobel Peace Prize winning authors love to, camp. So I went down there and Officer Frank was there. And I said, "Hi, Officer Frank, it's Dan Henschel." And he said, "Shh. Keep your voice down. Anonymity. Remember. Anonymity, remember, is the most important thing about this operation." So I said, "Yeah, whatever. What do you want to tell me? Because I want to go to bed. It's very late. Because 5:30 p.m. is when I started getting ready for bed." And he said, "So, we are almost complete setting up all of the operations for the operation. What we're going to have you do is we are going to have you pretend that you are literally Taylor Swift. So you're going to be staging a concert in the area. And we want to use Emergency Vet Bar and Grill as the location of the after party. So we're going to contact Big Red as if we are Taylor Swift's management team, and we're going to reserve the space for the after party." And I started to get a little nervous because I was like, "Officer Frank, I can't sing. I don't look like Taylor Swift at all. I think that you're really, I'm a good actor, but I think that you're really, really putting a lot on me here for this operation to be successful." And he said, "Well, we thought about all that. And what we're going to do is have you Taylor Swift's a big celebrity. One of the reasons why we wanted to do it this way is because we figured if you just pretended to be some random woman, then it would be a lot easier for Big Red and his cohort to discover the truth, for many reasons. But if you pretend that you're a very high-profile celebrity," and I was like, "Well, excuse me, I'm already kind of a high-profile celebrity, I think." And he said, "Sure, okay. But if you pretend that you're even higher of a profile celebrity, then you'll be able to be surrounded by an entourage. We'll have you kind of with a 24/7 security detail, which will be better for your personal protection, and then in addition, the 24/7 security detail will be undercover officers who can sort of help, gather information." So I said, "Wow, okay." And he said, "Here are a bunch of videotapes of Taylor Swift doing things." And I said, "What kind of things?" And he said, "All sorts of things. These are highly sensitive intelligence documents. We want you to watch all of them, and we want you to study them very closely, and we want you to be get very good at mimicking Taylor Swift exactly. Because you are going to have to, we'll try to keep you hidden as much as we can in the entourage, but you're going to have to speak, you're going to have to sort of dance, and you're going to have to do the concert. So I said, wait a minute. So I'm going to have to do a fake Taylor Swift concert I can't sing. And he said, don't worry, we're going to have a backtrack. We'll just, it'll be fine. All you have to do is, it doesn't have to be the best concert in the world, right? It just has to be a concert. There has to be a woman who resembles Taylor Swift, who goes on stage and does all of the things that could be considered concert-like. Because that's just going to be, setting the stage. I mean, Big Red's not going to go to the concert, who cares? If I don't know how many people would go to the Taylor Swift concert, but if 1,000 random losers are just like, oh, Taylor Swift kind of was a little weird tonight, that's barely going to make any headlines because she's already weird, and I'm sorry. By the way, Taylor Swift, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. You're going to have to take it up with Officer Frank because I was always a fan of yours. And I just hope that, I hope that you don't have any sensitivity about this kind of stuff. I mean, if you are watching, I would recommend that you watch my short film Sister, which is available on YouTube for free. That's a good summation of my creative skills, and if you need anybody to, I don't know, make a concert movie or something, let me know. So I was studying the tapes, and Taylor Swift is from Nashville. So I started trying to kind of work on my Taylor Swift voice. Hi there, I'm Taylor Swift, and I'm a singer. I'm a country singer. I sing songs all the time. I have several albums. The first one was self-titled. The second one was Red. The third one was 1989. The next one, and so on and so forth. You get the idea, right? I think it's pretty good. I mean, I know it doesn't sound, it's not like I'm not a dead ringer, but I think, for the all intents and purposes of this operation, I think it's serviceable. I think it's a serviceable accent. I think it's a serviceable performance. And ultimately, that's really all that it is. Plus, also, something that you have to think about, right now you're watching my Taylor Swift performance on film or video, which is a much more intimate medium than on stage, right? Which is sort of the way that I was thinking about this performance, because I'm going to be on stage for the concert, and then I'm going to be on stage, in the bar with Big Red performing. And so, when you a performance is not the same, even if you're playing the same character, you would not play it in the same way, if you're on film versus if you're on stage, because with film, you get right up in there and you see all the little micro expressions and you can really study the intricacies of the performance. But on stage, it just has to be, generally speaking, a good, generally speaking, it just has to be broad stroke, And also, it's not like Big Red or Big Labowski or any of the Big Redders have ever met Taylor Swift before, so they're not going to know, So I said, okay, that's great. And Officer Frank said, all right, so the concert starts in about an hour. And I was like, hang on a minute. Whoa. What do you mean? And he said, yeah, at the Hollywood Bowl, so you better get over there if you're going to beat the traffic. And I said, I don't even know no, I can't do the concert right now. Can we schedule it in like a week and I can practice a little bit? And he said, nope, you get in the car, they'll drive you over. So then I started having a panic attack, and I was like, Officer Frank, I have not had any time to even study these videotapes that you gave me. I have to go to the thrift store and get a VCR to even be able to play them. you're putting too much faith in my ability to improv. I can improv when I'm doing dinky little YouTube videos, but I can't improv a full stage performance as Taylor Swift, one of the biggest pop stars in America and the world. And he said, you're going to do fine, because we think ultimately, if you had too much time to think about this, you're going to get in your own head too much, and you're going to, it's not going to come out as good as if you just have that sort of trial by fire, You'll find it while you're up there. Don't worry about it. So I was like, no, I can't do this. And I started having a panic attack. I will admit, I started crying, And they said, just put him in the car, give him some of the, which was a syringe that they injected me with something. I don't know, And so that sort of made me agreeable. I don't know what was in it, but it's the Officer Frank was like, this is something that we use all the time for people. So I was like, okay, all right. So I get in the back of the cruiser, and they drive me up to the Hollywood Bowl, which from the abandoned train tracks, was quite a drive. I mean, it was Friday night, so it was like, Jesus Christ, rush hour was gnarly. Eventually we ended up getting there about 15 minutes before the concert was supposed to start. So I got out and I met all of the actors who were going to be in the entourage. So the first guy was I forget his name, honestly. I think it was Sandy, something like that. It was something along those lines. And I said, hello, nice to meet you. And he said, sup. And I said, oh, you know what? I should probably be in character. I should probably go method for this. So I was like, hi there. My name is Taylor Swift. I'm going to be singing some songs. And Sandwich kind of looked at me like, and looked around at all the other actors and was like, this guy really? I mean, this is ridiculous. And then he started the other actors, I think, started to smell blood because they could smell that I was nervous. So they were like, so how much on-stage experience do you have? How much improv experience do you have? And I said, oh, I did some improv in college, and I don't know. I mean, sometimes I'll, it's been a long time since I've done any improv on stage. And they said, what are your credits? Look, we're just curious what kind of stuff you've been working on. And I was like, well, I mostly do stuff online. And as soon as you say that, then people's eyes tend to glaze over, and they're like, oh, you're not a real entertainer. You're a content creator. So they said, so you haven't done any improv on stage or anything like that recently? And I said, well, I mean, I guess if you consider, I do these car videos where I sit in the car and I talk for a long time. And they said, oh, that's cute, And then they started sort of, right after that point, they didn't like me. And I'll be honest with you, I think the reason for that is because, ultimately they're jealous because the entertainment industry as we know it is dying. And so I think that they're a little jealous that they are sort of the dinosaurs, who are in a real shitty spot because they don't know how to innovate. They don't know how to be a trailblazer and how to sort of try to come up with the next big thing, right? They're trying to chase the big thing that's already there. And by the time they catch up to it, it's going to be gone, Whereas with me, I'm kind of the front line, so to speak. I'm the avant-garde. So in the moment, it may seem like, oh, he's just an idiot fucking around. But, the more time goes on, I think that I'll be vindicated by history, So anyway. So, that's fine. I mean, it's just a lot of ego in Hollywood, And so that gets to be a little bit irritating. But these guys, I think, I was like, well, I guess if we're going to be sort of performing these scenes together, if you're going to be my entourage, then we should probably warm up a little bit. We should probably sort of get acclimated with each other. So there's this improv game called Zip, Zap, Zop, which I don't know if any of you have heard of, but it's basically it's basically a game where you all stand in a circle, and then you go zip to one person. You go zip, and then the other person catches it and goes zap, zap. What is it? I kind of forget how it goes now. Zip. So you do zip to the one person, the other person goes zap to another person in the circle, and then that person goes zap, and then you keep going zip, zap, zap towards everybody, and it's supposed to, I don't know what it's supposed to do, actually. It's just, I guess, something that people do, to occupy their time while they don't get any work, and they wait for the phone to ring while it collects cobwebs in the corner. So we were like, let's play some zip, zap, zop. So we were going zip, zap, zop. And then a couple of tweenies came in, some Taylor Swift diehards came in. And so I was not expecting it. And they came up with their CDs. So it was like CDs nuts. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have made that joke while we were talking about young children. Apologize. Eddie, cut this whole video, honestly. So the teeny boppers came in and were like, "Hi, Taylor Swift," and I at this point I was just looked like this. So I turned around and they were like, "Ow!" and they ran off crying. So I was a little annoyed, and I said to Officer Frank, "You didn't tell me that I was going to be going in character, And he said, "All right, you're in character." Poof. So I was like, okay. So they brought in some more teeny boppers. And I said, "Hi, y'all. I'm Taylor Swift. And I am singing a song tonight for y'all." And they said, "Hi, Taylor. We're so big fans of you." I hate children. God. And I was like, "Well, y'all, I'm going to be honest with you. You should probably try to get into some other music because mine is very generic. And I think that you would be more rewarded if you got into somebody like Charlie XCX. Do you like her?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Well, you should, because she's very good." So, all right, run along now. I gotta stretch my hamstrings. So they left, and everybody in the room was kind of like, it was very awkward. And I said, "Well, listen, it's going to take me a little while to refine this completely, okay? I'm not going to come out of the gate being Daniel Day-Lewis. So just be patient. I'll find it eventually along the way, So I could hear the crowd sort of go like, Taylor Swift, and I got in my wig and my, makeup and sparkly outfit. And the way that Taylor Swift sort of acts at concerts, actually, it's kind of convenient because her performances often look like somebody who was just told 10 minutes ago that they have to pretend to be Taylor Swift, who has no dancing experience or singing experience. So I figured this was going to be pretty easy because what I'm going to be doing is basically what she looks like she's doing all the time, So the MC or whatever came on the radio and said, "Give it up for Taylor." And they all went, "Yeah." And I looked over at Officer Frank and I said, "How many songs do I have to do?" And he said, "Why don't you just do 3? So I said, "What are the songs going to be?" And he said, "I don't know. You're Taylor Swift. Get out there." And they pushed me out. And I don't know if any of you have ever been on stage, but it's very strange because you can sort of see the audience, but it really is like when you go up there, you transcend yourself and you enter heaven, it's an out-of-body experience, to be sure, because you're so afraid. Like, you're sort of like, oh! And then you leave your body and you enter some other realm, And the lights are so blindingly bright that you can if you squint, you can kind of see the audience, but you mostly just feel that they're there. So I was sort of like, I got the microphone. I said, "Hi, y'all. How are y'all doing tonight?" And the whole, auditorium was like, "Good." And I said, "Okay. Well, I'm going to sing for you tonight." And I looked around and I realized there's nothing on stage. There's no guitar. There's no other band members. It's just me. So I sort of looked at Officer Frank and I was like, and he was just, oh. So I was like, okay. And I was trying to think of the songs that I could remember. See, this is what happens when I do a character for a long time. I just start going into it and I can't stop. It is like Daniel Day-Lewis a little bit, So I said, all right, here's a song that y'all are gonna know. It's called, what's a Taylor Swift song? And I was trying to, my mind was totally blank because I was very nervous. And so I said, I'm gonna sing my boyfriend left me for a horse. Which sounds like, I think that could be a Taylor Swift song, That sure sounds a lot like it. So there's no instruments, remember, there's nothing. It's just me up there, which I don't understand why they would have forsaken me like this. But, and I kept looking back at Officer Frank and he was like, doing this. And I was like, so I was like, so I just started and I was like, la, 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 la. My boyfriend left me for a horse, and I was very sad. He said that I am too complicated, and he needs a horse because he likes carrots. My boyfriend said that I was too. And then I said, you know what? Let's try a different song. So I said, okay, yeah, yay! That was song number 1. Now let's do song number 2. My English teacher told me that I was gay for Shakespeare. When I was in high school, I read a play called King Lear, and I remember loving it so much that I looked over at Officer Frank and he was like just sort of doing this. And I was like, okay. Now for my last song of the night. This one is called what if I'm there's a and at this point I was sweating because I think this is where the lack of real improv experience sort of started to shine, because I was just like, and I remember I was trying to think back to all the things they told me in improv, like, just don't think about it too hard, Because if you start to think, just say they always really emphasize, like, say the first thing that comes to your head. Don't even think about it. And it's like, well, then, I'm going to say something horrible. If I say the first thing that comes to my head, then I'm going to say something that's like really weird and crazy, So then I thought, you know what? How often do I get to be in front of an auditorium full of impressionable children? I should really use this opportunity to teach them something about life that they can take with them, and then hopefully they'll remember for the rest of their life. So I was trying to think kind of along those lines. And I said, this next song is called Drugs That Are Okay to Use. And then I realized that that's probably not a good idea because the YouTube video would get taken down if I sang that song. So then I thought, okay, what's another song I could sing? My favorite food is pie. Because I was thinking pie is Southern, right? I mean, I don't know, pecan pie or whatever. So then I said, okay, this one's really got to be a showstopper. So then I started clapping my hands like this. And I figured and I said, clap your hands with me, y'all! And so I figured if everybody's clapping their hands, then they won't be able to hear what I'm saying. So then I said, pie, 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 pie. I love pie, pie, pie. Hey, this isn't bad, actually. This is pretty good. It's percussive, Pie, 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 pie. I'm saying pie with a Southern accent. Pie, pie. And then I said, I can just do this for the whole time. I started kind of getting into it, to be honest with you. Pie, 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 pie. Pie. Then I said, thanks, y'all, for coming. And I ran backstage, and Officer Frank was just like, Jesus fucking Christ. And there was just sort of like stunned silence in the audience, and they were all kind of like uncomfortably looking at each other. And I will admit, I thought that the most humiliating moment of my life was being on stage, but it turns out the most humiliating moment of my life was being backstage after I had just done all that. And I was just looking at the floor because I couldn't face the improv actors, and the police officers and everybody. And I started to feel really, I get that way sometimes after a performance where I'm just like, man, I really blew it. Because it's hard to see yourself from outside of your own perspective. You're sort of just so inside of yourself that you are very self-critical. So I was kind of just like, yeah, whatever. And then when I came off stage, some people were like fist bumping me, and they were like, man, that was so good. And I could tell that they were making it up. I was like, yeah, whatever, but thanks for the effort, I guess. Thanks for trying. Thanks for trying to be supportive. I thought the pie song was good, though. I like that one. I thought that was good. It was interesting, So maybe I'll have to get Addie to do a version of that we can sell on Patreon. So they ushered me, they sort of shepherded me into the limo that was supposed to take me and my entourage over to the emergency vet bar and grill for the after party. And the ride was very awkward because I sort of was still recovering from the concert. And I could tell that the entourage people, because they're just, they're kind of just bitter actors. So I could tell that all of them were thinking about how much better they would have done if they had been able to go up there instead of me, But again, listen, everybody seems to think that they can do what I do because I make it look easy, when really that's just because I'm good at it, So everybody see it and they're like, oh man, I wish that I could sit in my car all day and do nothing and yell all the time in my camera. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. Or is there? Is that the reason why you haven't done it and I did? Might want to think about that a little harder. Give it a shot. Sorry. So I decided to break the ice, and I said, have you been seeing this tool fog that's in the Central Valley of California? And they were like, what? And I said, it's kind of crazy. It's like this, the Central Valley of California is like this valley that's, the topography of California is very interesting because it's kind of like all pretty rugged mountainous, except for the middle, a strip right in the middle that's very fertile. And so that's where so much produce is grown, is in the California Central Valley. It's also called the San Joaquin Valley, which used to be actually several thousand years ago. I'm not sure exactly the time frame, but it used to be a lake, a body of water, And so if it rains a lot, then part of it fills back up because the lake is forming again. Even though there's roads going through it and all sorts. It's not the whole Central Valley, but a little portion. So the tool fog is very interesting, Tule, because it's like kind of like this fog, but I'm not in the Central Valley, I'm in Los Angeles. But it is exactly like this because it's named after the tool grass, tool reed that grows in the Central Valley of California, and it has something to do with the wintertime, in the early winter, particularly November, December, a phenomenon can occur where it's kind of like the inverse of the marine layer. So fog condenses over the Central Valley, but not the rest of California. So they've been having this tool fog for weeks straight. I mean, it's weeks. Every day it's been completely foggy, and they haven't seen the sun at all. And it's kind of crazy because it's just of how long it's been, how long the duration has been. So yeah, I think it's interesting because, it'll be like today, for example, a couple days ago, the high was 84 here. And then in the Central Valley, it was in the 40s because of the tool fog. So I don't know. I always think that that's very interesting, and the other actors were texting on their phone and they didn't give a shit at all, because they don't care, and I was like, well, guys, have you ever thought about something? Maybe if you had a little bit more curiosity about the world around you, then maybe you'd be more successful than you are right now. Instead of sitting around like a vessel waiting to be filled by someone else, sitting around waiting for somebody else to give you your big break, or waiting for them to give you an opportunity because you just deserve it, versus getting on your fucking hands and knees, figuratively, and making it happen for yourself. Have you ever thought about the fact that maybe the reason why you're sitting here right now is because you've been sitting around waiting for an opportunity instead of making one for yourself like I did with this Taylor Swift bullshit? And then we arrived to the emergency vet bar and grill. And I walked in, and there was nobody there, but it was all set up nicely for the after party. So they had catering and, balloons, and there's a big banner that said, "Welcome, Taylor," and Officer Frank said, "All right, listen, this is going to be difficult to sell up close. So you're going to be surrounded by your entourage, and wherever you go, they're going to walk with you, sort of. So you need to be very connected with them. You need to be very fluid." I said, okay. So we went into the bar, and they were sort of like hut, following me wherever I went, tracing me around. And walked up to the bar, and the Big Labowski was behind the bar back, making drinks. And so I said, "Hi there! Hi, who are you?" And he said, "Oh, my name's, what was his voice again? Sus, what's up, dude? What's up, dude? I'm Leaf." And I said, Hi, Leaf. Is that Irish?" And he said, "Yeah, bro." And then I said, "So I saw that you got hit by some kind of like a bottle or something outside, and everybody thought you were gonna die." And he said, "Yeah, some crazy guy. I don't know who the hell it was. We still have no idea, but he hit me pretty hard on the back of the head, and I collapsed. And they did think I was dead for a while until I got back up and was conscious again. And so I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. Who would do that?" And he said, I don't know. We checked the security camera, but all we could see was just, some guy, who kind of looked a lot like you, honestly. And I was like, ha, what? And he said, yeah, he was wearing a blonde wig that was, kind of looked like you from the back. And I was like, well, if you want to find out what I look like from the back, why don't you buy me, So then I sort of wanted to change the subject, and I said, so where is this big red guy? And he says, oh, well, he's on PBS, I don't know, between 8 and 9 Eastern Central Time. And I believe that you can watch him Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I was like, what? And I said, no, not Clifford the show. Is Clifford still on? Eddie, Google if Clifford is still on the air and if that's still a funny topical joke. And if it's not, take it out. Okay? I'll do it. Let me do an alt for you. It's another big red guy. So I said, can you tell me where's the big red guy? And the Big Labowski said, oh, well, he is, if you do bad things when you're alive and you go to hell, he's there. And I said, no, not the devil. I'm talking about your boss. That was weak. Let me just, okay, Eddie, I'm just going to do one more alt. Okay? And then you pick one. You pick whichever the 3 is the funniest. There's another big red guy. Big red guy. I said, okay. I said, where's Big Red? And he said, we don't carry that soda. Because Big Red's a soda. Eddie, I'm going to do one more. This is going to be it. Hi there. Where's your big red guy? And the Big Labowski said, well, he's, big red guy. Who's a big red guy? I think I got some good options. Eddie! Forget it. So I said, no, I'm talking about your boss. I'm talking about Big Redderson Reginald Ferdinand III Johnson. And he said, he couldn't make it tonight. And I said, what? What the fuck do you mean he's not here tonight? What's the point of doing any of this? And then one of the entourage looked at me like, shh. I was like, oh, that's a shame. Why is he not here tonight? And Big Labowski said, I'm not sure, actually. I think he had to go to a meeting. And so I looked at some of the officers that were in the entourage, because the entourage was a mixture of actors and officers. So, the officers, we sort of were looking, we're like, interesting. So I said, well, that's really a shame. If he's going to come back in tonight? And Big Labowski was like, yeah, I think he'll be back. I think so. I think he'll be back. I don't know if he, to be honest with you. And then Big Labowski sort of to kind of, I could tell that I was cracking his nut, so he was like, to be honest with you, Big Red is not the most attentive boss here. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do you mean? And he said, well, I think that he just, to be honest with you, he has a lot of alcohol problems. And so he kind of makes me shoulder most of the responsibility. I mean, I basically have to do everything that's bar related, so I'm the manager. I'm the front of house manager. I'm the back of house manager. Obviously I'm the mixologist. I'm the one who orders inventory. I'm the one who cleans everything at the end of the night. Sorry, I want to take my jacket off. It's getting a little warm. I'm saying this now as me. The Big Labowski did not say this at the time. There was end quotes before I said the jacket, and now start quotes again. Yeah, he makes me do everything. And I don't know. Sometimes I just wonder if he's even like why he wanted to even open the bar, to be honest. with you. So I was like, wow. And that's when I started to think that there may be an opportunity here. Because if Big Labowski, if we might be able to flip him, if he's starting to have doubts about his relationship to Big Red, that might be our ace in the hole. So I was like, all right, we're going to keep working this guy. So then I said, y'all, you something? You're the nicest guy. And he said, oh my gosh, really? And I said, yeah, I got to say, a lot of the men in the music industry are not very nice. And he said, don't you have a husband? Didn't you just get engaged to that guy? And I was like, what? And one of the entourage whispered in my ear, Travis Kelce is a football player. He plays for the Cincinnati Reds. What is Kelce? Kansas City Chiefs. So I said, oh yeah, Travis Kelce. Yeah, he's a nice guy. And then I started to think, you know what? If I maybe give a little bit of a yang to his yin, if I sort of serve him back, because he opened up to me. So if I open up to him now and confide something in him, then maybe that will make him feel more comfortable opening up to me more. So I said, to tell you the truth, I don't love Travis. And he was like, what? Really? And I said, yeah, I just think that he's not my kind of guy. But we, it ended up being a good PR story. And so I felt trapped. I felt like after he won the Super Bowl, I couldn't break up with him because then everybody would hate me. So and he was like, whoa, that's heavy shit, man. And I was like, yeah, it is. And Big Labowski said, you're pretty cool. And I was like, oh, thanks. And then I remembered I'm supposed to be Taylor Swift. I was like, oh, thanks. Well, I had a great time tonight. Thanks for showing me a good time. When's the next time you're going to be in? And he said, well, I'm here every night. And I was like, really? And he said, yep, I'm here every night. The entire time the bar's open and I do everything. So come by whenever, because I'll be here and I'll always be doing something. So I was like, that's great to know, because yeah. So then I was like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty good for one night, right? I mean, that's, seemed like that went well. So I left with my entourage, and we got back in the limo, and I started taking off the wig, and I was taking off all the stuff. And I was like, oh, man, I'm exhausted. I mean, I thought that I was going to be going to bed hours ago before I even heard about the concert. To me, it was like going to the train tracks was too much of a hassle. Now, that's all I did at concert, and then I just had a very draining conversation with a random guy, And then, so we're sort of sitting in the limo, because there was some I don't know why we were sitting in the limo. We just were, okay? And I look, because the Big Red bar, entertainment bar and what's the veterinarian bar and grill was completely open, and there was windows, so you could see inside. So I saw Big Labowski mopping up, pushing the mop, and then I saw Big Red come in the back, and I was like, guys, look, hey, take a look, and the windows are tinted the limo windows, our windows. So we could all see Big Red. We couldn't hear him, obviously, but we saw him come in. And he was surrounded by several other bald men who I guess were his cronies. And Big Labowski stopped mopping, and he sort of got all like on edge, And Big Red was kind of like, we couldn't hear him, but he was sort of being a little confrontational. And then Big Red shoved Big Labowski like that. Big Labowski fell to the floor, dropped the mop. And then Big Red pulled out a gun, cocked it like this, and pointed it right at Big Lebowski's head while he was on the floor. And Big Labowski was freaking out, putting his hands up and like going like, ah, no, 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 no. And Big Red was yelling. He was very upset. And then he fired a shot, not at Big Labowski, but sort of towards us, out the window. Boink! It went through the window, and then I was like, look out! Bullet came in the limo window and back out the other side. And then I look over at the guy who was the head, the actor who was giving me a hard time about improv. And he was like, and he had a big hole in his neck. And I was like, was that always there? And he was like, and all the other people in the room were like, oh my God, Red's the main character's name. Freddy, oh no. And they were like freaking out. And I was like, well, maybe you should have been a little more quick on your feet. Maybe you should have been a little bit more of a quick thinker. Maybe if you hadn't sat there and thought about what am I supposed to do, if you had actually just improv'd well, you would have been able to get out of the way of the bullet, or you would have been able to read your scene partner's behavior and see that he was about to shoot, which I saw, which is why I got out of the way. So which one of us is really better at improv now? Fucker. And I said all of that while he was like, and he died. So, the end.